My mother called me the responsible one. She said it like it was a compliment. It took me 31 years to understand it was never a compliment. It was a job description. I work in forensic accounting. I spend my days finding money that people try to hide. Shell companies, double ledgers, creative depreciation schedules that aren't creative so much as criminal. I'm good at it. I've testified in 3 federal cases. I have a plaque on my wall from the FBI field office in Charlotte that says, "Outstanding contribution to financial integrity." My father has never once asked me what I do for a living. What he does know is that I'm good with numbers. He's known that since I was 9 years old and balanced his restaurant's petty cash because his bookkeeper quit without notice. He's been using it ever since. My father owns 3 mid-size event venues in the Carolinas. Not huge, not the kind of places where celebrities get married, but profitable, steady. The kind of business that runs on reputation and repeat customers, and the kind of charm my father has always had in abundance. He's the guy who remembers your name, remembers what you ordered at your last visit, sends flowers when your mother dies. People love him. People trust him completely. I used to be one of those people. The call came on a Tuesday in October. My mother, not my father, which already told me something. She had that particular brightness in her voice that meant she was performing cheerfulness rather than feeling it. "Your father and I have been talking," she said, "and we've decided to do something really special for our anniversary, their 35th. I remembered because I had been saving for months to take them somewhere nice for dinner. "We're renewing our vows," she said, "at Harborview." That was their flagship venue, the nicest of the 3, right on the water outside of Wilmington. We're flying the whole family out to the Outer Banks for the week beforehand, renting a big house, everyone together. I felt something loosen in my chest. That was real. That was the family I had wanted to be part of my whole life. The one that actually gathered, that sat together, that remembered birthdays without being prompted. "That sounds wonderful," I said, and I meant it completely. "We're so glad you think so," my mother said, and there was a small pause, just a half-second pause that I should have noticed. "Because we need you to stay at the Harborview property during the week, just to oversee the setup. The coordinator is new this season and your father doesn't fully trust her yet, with the floral logistics and the vendor contracts." I sat with that for a moment. "So the whole family is going to the Outer Banks," I said slowly. "And I'm staying at the venue. It's only a week, sweetheart. And you'd be staying in the owner's suite. It's beautiful. You've always loved that room. Mom, your brother can't do it. He has the kids, and your sister just started her new position. She can't take time off. My brother had 3 kids under 7. My sister had been at her new job for 6 weeks. I understood those limitations. What I didn't understand was why those limitations translated to me specifically, being excluded from a family vacation I had been looking forward to for 2 months. "I'll think about it," I said. I thought about it for exactly 4 hours. Then I called my father. He didn't let me finish the sentence. "I knew you'd come through," he said. "Already moving on. Already done with the conversation. I'll email you the vendor list tonight. The florist needs a deposit confirmation by Friday." That was the moment I should have said no. That was the moment I should have recognized what was happening and stopped it. Instead, I wrote down the florist's name and said I'd look for the email. It arrived that night. 14 pages. Vendor contacts, delivery windows, setup schedules, linen inventory, a detailed seating chart for 240 guests, parking coordination for the ceremony shuttle, and a note at the bottom in my father's handwriting. His actual handwriting, which he only used when he wanted something to feel personal, that said, "We couldn't do this without you. You're the only one I trust." I printed that page and put it on my refrigerator. I want you to remember that. I drove down to Wilmington on a Sunday. My family flew to the Outer Banks on Monday. My mother texted me a photo of the house. Enormous cedar shingled, right on the water, a porch that ran the full length of the front. My nieces and nephews were already in their swimsuits. "Wish you were here," she wrote, with a sun emoji. I was at Harborview confirming the rental linen count with a supplier who had arrived 40 minutes late and seemed annoyed that I expected an apology. The owner's suite was beautiful, I'll give them that. High ceilings, a 4-poster bed, windows that looked directly out at the water. I ate takeout on the balcony that first night and told myself this was fine. This was temporary. This was the responsible thing to do. On Tuesday, I found the first discrepancy. I wasn't looking for it. I was reconciling the vendor deposit records against the venue's operating account. My father had given me full financial access so I could authorize payments during the week, and I found a line item that didn't match. A catering prepayment of $12,000 charged to the venue account for a vendor I didn't recognize. I pulled up the vendor contact list my father had sent. They weren't on it. It could have been a typo. It could have been a vendor added after the list was compiled. I flagged it and moved on. On Wednesday, I found 3 more. Equipment rental, audiovisual services, a facilities maintenance charge from a company called Coastal Premier Solutions that when I searched the name returned no results. Not a website, not a LinkedIn, not a state business registration, nothing. I sat in the owner's suite at 11 o'clock on a Wednesday night with my laptop open and a feeling in my stomach that I knew very well. I had that feeling every time I started pulling on a thread that was about to unravel something significant. It's not excitement, exactly. It's more like the moment before a storm when the air pressure drops and everything goes very still. I pulled up the venue's full financial records. My father had given me access to authorized payments. He had not, I think, considered what else I might do with that access. I'm a forensic accountant. I know what fraud looks like. I know it doesn't announce itself. It hides inside normal-looking transactions, in vendors with generic names and addresses that trace back to mailbox rental stores, in payments that go out but never quite connect to services that come in. What I found over the next 2 days was methodical and deliberate, and had been running for at least 4 years. Coastal Premier Solutions was a shell company. So was Meridian Event Partners. So was 3 others with similarly vague, professional-sounding names. All of them appeared regularly in the venue's expense records. None of them appeared to correspond to any actual vendor relationship I could verify. The payments ran between $4,000 and $18,000. They occurred on a roughly 6 to 8 week cycle. Over 4 years, across all 3 venues, I calculated the total at just under $900,000. $900,000. Removed from the venue operating accounts in small enough increments to stay below certain reporting thresholds. Routed through companies that didn't exist in any meaningful sense. The oldest entry I could find was dated 8 months after my father had brought in a silent business partner, a man I had met exactly twice at family dinners, who my father always described as just an investor, and who I had never thought about much until right now. I didn't sleep that night. I made copies of everything. I documented the pattern, timestamped my records, created a parallel ledger that cross-referenced every suspicious transaction against the corresponding bank statements. I did it carefully, and I did it thoroughly, and I did it the same way I would have done it for any client who had come to my office with a suspicion they couldn't yet name. The difference was that this client was my father's company. The money that was missing was supposed to fund the retirement my parents had been describing for years, the one where they sold the venues and moved somewhere warm and comfortable. The money that was missing was, in a very real sense, my family's future. And someone, my father's partner, or my father himself, or both of them together, had been quietly taking it. I called my contact at the FBI field office in Charlotte on Thursday morning. She's someone I've worked with before, careful and methodical, the kind of person who doesn't move fast but moves correctly. I told her I had something and asked if she could meet. She asked if it was urgent. I said I thought it qualified. We met at a coffee shop outside the city on Thursday afternoon. I brought my documentation. She brought a colleague I hadn't met before. I want to be precise about what happened next, because I've had a lot of time to think about it, and I want to be fair. I did not go to the FBI out of anger. I was not thinking about the Outer Banks, or the family photo my mother had sent that morning from the beach, all of them in matching linen shirts for what appeared to be a professional photo shoot. I was not thinking about my father's voice on the phone the previous Tuesday, already done with the conversation before I'd finished my sentence. I was thinking about $900,000 and 5 shell companies and 4 years of systematic theft. I was thinking about what I would do if any other client had handed me this exact documentation. I knew exactly what I would do. I had done it before. I would do it again. The FBI moved carefully, which is the only way they move. They verified my documentation. They subpoenaed the bank records. They traced the shell companies to an address in South Carolina that turned out to be a mailbox at a shipping store, rented under the name of my father's business partner's brother-in-law. They found the corresponding personal accounts. They found travel records and property purchases that didn't align with any declared income. I found out later, much later, that my father knew. Not everything, and not from the beginning, but he knew enough. His partner had approached him 3 years in, when the scheme was already running, and presented it as a tax mitigation strategy. My father had agreed not to look too closely. That's the phrase his attorney used in the initial filing. Agreed not to look too closely. I have thought about those words more times than I can count. I flew to the Outer Banks on Friday. Nobody knew I was coming. I landed, took a rideshare to the rental house, and walked in while my family was eating dinner on that big cedar porch. My father went still the moment he saw my face. He knew me well enough for that, at least. "We need to talk," I said. "Just you and me." We walked to the end of the dock while the rest of the family pretended to continue eating. I could feel them watching. I told him what I had found. I told him what I had done. I kept my voice level because I had been rehearsing that conversation for 2 days, and I had decided I was not going to cry and I was not going to yell. I was just going to tell him the truth. He didn't deny it. That surprised me. I had expected some version of a performance. Outrage, confusion. How could you, your own father? But instead he looked out at the water for a long time, and then he said, very quietly, "I knew you'd find it eventually." "Gave me full access to the accounts," I said. "I know," he said. "I don't know why I did that. I think I do know why. I think some part of him was exhausted and wanted it to stop and couldn't find another way to make that happen. I'm not offering that as an excuse. I'm just telling you what I think is true." "What happens now?" he asked. "There are 2 agents who've been working this for 6 days," I said. What happens now is not up to me anymore. I went back inside. I said goodnight to my mother, who was watching me with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Not anger, not sadness, something more like recognition, like she had been waiting for this particular conversation for a very long time without knowing what form it would take. I kissed my nieces and nephews. I took a rideshare back to the airport. I flew back to Charlotte and went to work the next morning. The arrest came 6 weeks later. My father's partner first, then my father on lesser charges, conspiracy and willful blindness, and a few other things his attorney was already negotiating. The venues were placed under temporary receivership while the financial investigation concluded. My father's partner ultimately received 8 years. My father negotiated a plea that included 18 months, full cooperation, and restitution. The restitution is the part people don't expect when I tell this story, because the money hadn't gone far. The shell company accounts were seized almost immediately after the subpoenas came through. The property purchases were tied up in the investigation. Most of the $900,000 was recoverable. After legal fees and the receivership costs, the estate, which passed partly to my mother, partly held in trust, retained significant assets. The venues were sold at a fair market price to a hospitality group that approached us during the receivership. My mother moved to Asheville. She's fine. She's better than fine, actually. She has a small garden and goes to a ceramics class twice a week. And for the first time in 30 years, she seems to be sleeping well. She calls me every Sunday. We don't talk about my father very much. When we do, she speaks about him the way you speak about a country you've left, with complicated feelings and no desire to return. My brother called me 3 months after the arrest to tell me I had destroyed the family. I let him say everything he wanted to say. Then I said, the family was already in the process of being destroyed. I just made sure there was documentation. He hung up. We've spoken twice since then, short conversations about logistics and holidays, civil but careful. The way you are with someone you used to know well and no longer quite trust to be kind. My sister sent me a card. Just a card, no letter, with a short note inside that said, I know this wasn't easy. I'm sorry it had to be you. I keep that card in my desk drawer. I take it out sometimes. What I want to tell you, and I'm saying this as plainly as I can, is that there is a version of this story where I don't go to the FBI, where I find the discrepancies, feel that familiar drop in my stomach, and then close the laptop and go back to counting linens and confirming the florist deposit. Where I decide that protecting my family means pretending I didn't see what I saw. Where I spend the rest of my life knowing exactly what I know and choosing to carry it quietly, the way my father chose to carry it. I understand that version. I understand the logic of it. There are days when I wake up at 3 a.m. and I understand it completely. But I sat in that owner's suite on a Wednesday night, the room my father had offered me as a consolation prize for being excluded from a vacation my whole family was enjoying without me. And I looked at $900,000 moving through companies that didn't exist. And I thought about every client who had ever sat across from me and said I didn't want to believe it, and I kept hoping I was wrong. I thought about the FBI plaque on my wall. I thought about what it means to be good at something. It means you don't get to pretend you aren't. My father called me once from the facility about 4 months after his sentencing. He sounded smaller than I remembered, which shouldn't have surprised me but did. He asked how I was. I told him I was well. He asked if I was still doing the forensic work. I said yes. There was a long pause. You're very good at it, he said. I know, I said. Another pause. I should have told you about the accounts, he said. Earlier, I mean. Before all of this. I didn't know exactly what to say to that, so I said the thing that was most true. You should have told someone. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I told you eventually. You gave me the access codes, I said. That's not the same thing. No, he said. I know it's not. We didn't talk long after that. He gets 1 call a week, and I'm not sure I was who he'd planned to use it on. I hope he called my mother next. I hope she answered. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment in Charlotte. I have a plaque on my wall and a card in my desk drawer, and a sister who checks in every few weeks and nieces and nephews who send me drawings in the mail because my brother makes them do it, and maybe, I like to think, because they want to. I have a job I'm exceptional at. I have a best friend who I've known since college, who came and stayed with me for 2 weeks when everything broke open, who slept on my couch and brought groceries and never once said I told you so, even though she probably could have. I have a life that is entirely mine, every piece of it. I built it carefully during all those years when I was being the responsible one, the dependable one, the one who stayed behind and counted linens and confirmed deposits and made things run. I built it in the hours they weren't watching. And it turns out that when everything else falls away, the family vacations you weren't invited to, the phone calls that assumed your yes before they asked the question, the dinners where you sat quietly while your father talked about the business you were quietly keeping honest, what you have left is exactly what you built when no one was paying attention. It's enough. It's more than enough. I'm the responsible one. I finally understand that's a compliment.